So I thought we'd do a video about some throwers. Now, I know some of you, if you're watching this, you might be saying, hey, not many of them are throwers. And you might be right. Throwers come in all shapes and sizes. It can be about beam profile or outright beam distance. And you can spend a lot of money on a thrower. There are flashlights out there that cost, 200, 300, 400 pounds that are purpose built for long distance throw. I don't have any of those. I'm not really interested in them at that price range, and also that physical size. Most of them have got very large reflectors, large heads on them, and they're not going to be very portable or pocket friendly. Some even include a shoulder strap. They're so ungainly. But there are throwers out there, and probably more to the common man. I've just brought a selection out of some of the torches I've got that are of a throwy nature, just to sort of show the differences, and also sort of compare a little bit about how useful a beam can be, that sometimes outright numbers aren't the most useful. So we'll run down the line. So the first one here, we've got a little Maglite. This is the ML25LT. I put it here because, in the US you can pick these up for about $20. Really cheap, runs on 2 C-cell batteries, but we've got a fairly big, smooth, deep reflector there, and it also runs a Cree XPE2. So one of the keys to getting long distance throw is a small LED, because they've usually got a higher surface brightness, and a large reflector, because it allows you to focus that light more tightly. So you'll find most throwers generally have small LEDs and large reflectors, and get the combination right, and you get for a very good throwy torch. There are some exceptions. You can get good beam distance just through pure lumens, and some emitter types like the Luminous SBT90 is very good for long distance as well as putting out a lot of lumens. But generally a lot of throwers make lower lumen numbers. I like to think of it a bit like torque with an engine. Sometimes you can have like a turbo diesel that makes loads of torque, but actually doesn't make much horsepower. The same true with a thrower, is they sometimes don't always have that many lumens, but they can often make very high CD numbers. So the Maglite here, it's only actually 192 lumens, but mag rate it at about 28,500 CD. I've tested it on my lux meter, and I get somewhere around sort of 33,000. My own figures are obviously not going to be as accurate as the manufacturers, but you can take it as sort of a baseline. Next up, we've got quite an old flashlight. It's called a Jacob A60. Quite popular a number of years ago because they were very cheap and come with a very large smooth reflector. But we're packing an old Cree XRE in this one, so I think 200 lumens tops, maybe not even as much as that. Quite a narrow pencil beam from it, but it throws quite well, and if this was 10 years ago, that would be an exceptionally throwy flashlight. Next up, we've got a C8. So C8's a very common flashlight size, been used by a lot of people. You can mount them onto rifles as well for hunting. These days we've got quite a lot of emitter choice. This is actually one that I bought as a host. So it's actually running a 3 amp Q-Lite driver and a Cree XPG3. So at the time when I built it, that was quite a throwy light. Most of them came with XML2s. Might have found one with an XPL in there, but of course these days you've got the XPL HI emitter, things like the SST40, and a whole range of new Osram LEDs. But it's still quite a throwy little torch. I've measured it about, I think it's 39,000 lux, so we'll see what that one does. So that's another thing about LEDs, is usually an LED with a dome on it, which most of these actually do have, don't throw as well as an LED with a flat silicon layer on them rather than a dome. Now you can de-dome or slice the top off of many LEDs to get a lot more throw, but generally these are not like that, but I'll point out the ones that are. So the next flashlight, this is actually a bit of a monster. It's a 3 battery 26650 light. although I'm running it on 3 18650s Samsung 30Qs. Now this originally had old-fashioned XML emitters in it, so it's a triple flashlight, triple emitter, but with quite deep reflectors, and you can see, you know, we've got reflectors not far off the size of the Maglite, a little bit smaller perhaps. So this is still running the stock driver, but I've actually replaced the emitters with some XPL HIs. So it's quite throwy for what it is. We'll give that one a go. Next up, we've got a much more modern light. So this only came out this year. This is the Astrolux EA01. We've got a nice big tier optic in there. You might have seen my review of that one already. Very much like that light. This is the SST40 version. They do one with an XHP 50.2, which is much more floody. I kind of count this as like a mid-range sort of semi-thrower, because of the beam. I think you'll see when we fire it up, it's quite impressive. Astrolux have on their website saying it's 98,000 CD. I think that's a bit ambitious. On my lux meter I'm getting more like 60,000. Be keen to know if anybody else has done any lux readings on these. Next up is one of my favourite flashlights as well, although it has a very annoying electronic tail switch that turns on in your pocket. This is a Nocticon KR1. So as you can see, in this company it's actually the smallest, but it's by no means the least. So in here we've actually got one of these new Osram LEDs. So this one's actually the white flat W2. So it has no dome on it. It's a very small LED. Doesn't put out the highest lumens. I think it's only rated at about 1200 lumens, although it does take 8 amps to actually get to that output level. But it does throw very, very well for its size. On the International Outdoor website, they rate it at 100,000 CD. On my lux meter, I get anywhere between 94,000 and 98,000. So it seems pretty good. Next up, I think we've probably got perhaps the most controversial light here. So this is also an Astrolux. This is the FT03, but it's not the SST version, SST40 version. Where we've got the Cree version here with the XHP 50, which is that big LED. I can't quite get it to show on the camera. It's not de-domed or anything. It's just a completely stock flashlight. But it's more throwy than I think people give it credit for. Astrolux or Banggood claim it at 133,000 CD. I measured it at 110,000, so we're not a million miles off of that. And it, you know, it should be outperforming all the lights further down the chain here. Next up is currently my most throwy reflector light that I actually own. This is an Olight M3XSUT Javelot. So it was quite a lot of hype when this came out, because it was the first time sort of a big manufacturer offered a de-domed LED. So we've actually got an XPL in there that's been de-domed by Olight. I believe the later production ones actually moved on to using the proper XPL HI emitter rather than a de-domed one. So this has got quite a horrific tint shift on it, but it is quite a nice beam. But it's rated at 250,000 CD, so we've got a massive jump up from any of the other lights. My lux meter says around 200,000, so you know, give or take, I'm not a million miles away from that. I might have needed to take the reading a bit further away, because obviously throwers, they don't necessarily focus the light close up, so I might have needed to be sort of 25 feet away or something to get a decent reading for the lux on that one. But still, we'll see what that one does. And then last up, we've got an aspheric lens thrower. So you can just sort of see the LED in there. It's called a Unique Fire. So this is one I've had as a host and built up. I've got a 5 amp driver in this one, and this is running the even smaller Osram LED, which I don't think we're going to get it to focus on the camera. A little bit there. So this is what they call the W1. So it's sort of half the size of the W2 emitter in terms of the surface area. which makes it a lot more throwy because it focuses a lot tighter, but you get less lumens. I think it's rated more like 900 lumens, but with this aspheric lens it really focuses it into a really tight beam. Now I'm getting just over 500,000 CD on my lux meter with it, so again it's a huge big jump up from anything else here. But I think we'll run through them and kind of see where we get to, and I think you might be kind of surprised with the results of some of these. Okay, so the first torch we're going to use is this little Maglite. Now obviously, you know, it's a $20 torch. It's the only one here that's not running lithium ion. It's not going to be the most throwy torch in the world, but for its price point, its power source and its size, it does pretty good. So we'll turn this on. We have got a focusable beam here, so if we just focus that into a nice tight spot, we should hopefully be able to see that we've got something on the camera there. So there's like a little substation there on that pole, and an electricity box. Now this is not extreme distance. This is about 100 yards on the nose from where I'm standing. So I'm just coming a bit closer and go back out. But you know, 100 yards, you know, a fox looks pretty small, a person isn't particularly huge, and at night it's really hard to film longer distances without having you know, the camera much closer to your destination point for your light. But I can say with the naked eye that that's lighting up pretty good, that I could see a person standing there if need be. But on the camera we can see it's kind of perhaps struggling a little bit. So let's move on to the next flashlight. So this is the Jacob A60. Now I think these did vary in quality over the years. I would say I think the beam is slightly smaller than it is from the Maglite, although maybe slightly more intense. We're getting a little bit more light on target, but the beam is quite pencil thin. You know, what we're about 2 people high, perhaps at 100 yards. So again, you would be able to spot a person, but the area that you're actually lighting up is not very big. But you know, it's quite a little throwy light for what it is. Maybe I should look at modding this with a more modern emitter, but you know, kind of is what it is. Right, so now we're moving up to the C8. Now, so you can get these with quite a lot of different emitters. I imagine a D-domed XPG2 would actually work very, very well for a nice budget build in one of these. Although there are some sellers selling them with the Osram LEDs now. So I think we'll notice there's quite a bit of a change here. We've got a lot more sort of spill, and we've got a much broader beam than what we had with the other 2 lights. So hopefully you can see it on the camera, but I'm actually lighting up the box on the pole and the green box on the ground without having to move the beam. So we're lighting up a vastly bigger area, and it just makes the light a lot more usable. You know, I know we kind of want a beam that you can direct when you're using a thrower. You don't necessarily want loads and loads of flood, but too much of a pencil beam, and I think they only have limited use. This is certainly a lot more usable in terms of beam profile than the Maglite or the Jacobs. Right, so now we're going up to the big Lustfire, the only triple emitter light here tonight. Now this is not really a thrower, but due to the size of it and the LEDs I'm running in it, it actually gives it some pretty good beam distance, which is why I thought it was worth bringing it out. But we also get quite a lot of nice, it's not too much flood, but it just works really, really well. And as you can see, we're lighting up everything down there with absolute ease. I mean, this is a big heavy tank of a torch, much bigger than what I would normally use, but on the plus side is you can turn it on and it will maintain this output. It's not going to dim until the batteries go flat, and they're going to last absolutely ages, just pumping out this same sort of level of output. So you know, if you do need a lot of light for a long period of time, there's no denying you need the right power source, and you need something that's going to soak the heat up. And we'll sort of see that with some of the smaller lights, is even though they're very impressive, they'd be no good if you needed to do that for an hour. But this is an impressive light for what it is. It's actually very, very useful. I do use it across the fields quite a bit. Some traffic going by. We'll just wait for the cars to go past. You'll probably hear them in the background. So the next light I've got up is the little Astrolux EA01. So I'm really impressed with this light, and I think you'll see about the beam profile, it's quite different to anything else we've got here tonight. So I'll just ramp it up. So that's its maximum output on the high ramp, but we've got a turbo mode as well, which goes a little bit brighter. But we do have a spill beam, but it's not excessive. But you can see for 100 yards, absolutely no problem for this little light at all. It would light up a lot further. But the thing to note is just look how big that beam is actually down on the target. You know, it's even bigger than the triple emitter light, I think. And that's what makes this light so versatile, is it throws to a moderately good way. I mean, I think this is better than the C8. Plus it's physically smaller, and it's got a longer run time with this battery. You know, it's one of my favourite lights at the moment, this little EA01. But absolutely no trouble out to 100 yards with this, and you can just sort of light up a good amount of area without lighting up everything really close to you. Right, so on to the little Nocticon KR1. So it's the smallest light here, and as I say, you won't be unimpressed with this. This thing packs way above its size class. I'll just ramp that up to its maximum. So that's on the ramping mode. If we give it a double tap to turbo, a little bit brighter, but I mean, look at that. That's a lovely usable beam as well. So 100 yards, absolutely no trouble. This thing does outthrow the EA01. Despite the fact they've officially rated at pretty close numbers. I think this is probably more like a realistic 100,000 CD, whereas the EA01 is definitely more like sort of 60,000. But this has got a nice beam, because it's quite a small head. Even though you've got that small LED, you've got quite a decent sized beam there. The only downside is it's sucking 8 amps to be able to do this, and it does get hot, and it will ramp down. And on an 18650 battery, you're not going to get the longest run times, so you're going to have to sacrifice some of that distance if you actually want to use the torch for a while. But it is incredibly impressive with a really, really usable beam. I'm really loving these new Osram LEDs. Not the best tint, not the best CRI, but they're quite pleasant still. They're cool white, but they're not ugly. They're not green. They're not blue. They're not purple. They are just sort of cool white. So on to the controversial one, the FT03. So you can buy this torch with the SST40, which is a smaller LED with less lumens but more throw, and they even do it at the SBT90 if you want to pay quite a hefty premium. So that's just the top of the ramping mode, but if I just look it up into turbo, you can see the beam is not as throwy. The beam profile, we don't have a pencil beam and a dull spill beam, but what we do have is the beam distance. This thing is absolutely monstering 100 yards, and I know it will do the same at about 200 yards as well. Absolutely no trouble. Beyond that, it is beyond its means, but to be fair, it's beyond the means of any of the lights we've looked at so far, because this has got the highest CD rating out of any of the ones we've seen. But you know, if you want something that's very versatile, you can see we're lighting up a nice big area. That beam is just massive. I suppose it's a bit like the EA01, just with a lot more spill and a bit more throw. But then the flashlight itself is about sort of 2.5 times the size and a lot heavier. So that's your trade-off there. So now we're on to sort of probably the first true thrower out of this group of them. So this is the Olight Javelot. So we've got large smooth reflector, we've got that D-domed LED, it's rated at 1200 lumens and 250,000 CD, which is meant to be 1000 meters. Now that 1000 meters I assume is to like an ANSI FL1 level, so it'd be like a full moon at the end of your target. So it's not really going to light up much unless you're standing 1000 meters away. It's not that you can stand where you are and actually see something 1000 meters away with it. But it's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. The beam's a bit more concentrated than obviously the FTA3, but you can see we're putting a lot of light on target. But what's nice about this is it's quite usable. We've got some spill beam here, but the hotspot is not tiny. Again, I think, you know, of note there is that we're lighting up the box on the pole and the one on the ground at the same time. So you can clearly see what's out there. You're lighting up enough that you can see what's going on. And you can imagine if it was double the range, you know, the things you're looking at are going to be half the size, sort of thing. So if you're trying to spot a person or a fox, or, you know, if you're in North America, if you're trying to look for a coyote or something, you know, things get pretty small pretty quickly. You know, you get these wild claims on the forums of people want to be able to view stuff at 600 yards or, you know, 1000 meters away, and it's like, seriously, if you've got no binoculars, you know, you're not going to see stuff at that range, even if it was daylight, and make out what it is, let alone with a torch. But there you are. So on to the last light. So this is one that I've built myself, a bit of a fun project more than anything serious. So I've got that large aspheric lens, 5 amp driver, and the Osram W1 LED. And it's like, whoa, isn't that a very, very different beam? So it kind of looks a bit like a laser beam, but can you spot the problem? It's like we've got a lot of light landing on that target, but it's a very, very, very small target. In fact, we can only just light that box up on the ground. It's barely big enough beam to be able to do anything else. Again, we can light the box up on the pole there, but then you can see nothing else. Now, there are times when this might be what you want, but say, if you were looking at something 200 yards away, you know, the beam should expand a bit as distance goes down, as you know, as it gets further away, but it's just not going to light up much that's... I just don't find it very usable. And if you try and... Oops, not change the mode on it, but if you try and wind the beam out a bit, try and make it a bit bigger, you can see it does get a bit bigger, but very, very quickly we're going to start and lose the lumens. And it's like, well, actually, you've not got a lot of light going down range now. You know, really these aspheric throwers only work when you've got them really tightly focused. We're on the highest mode, yeah. So it's kind of fun. But what we'll do is we'll just get that Olight back and just actually do a side-by-side comparison. So even though we've got about double the CD rating on the aspheric lens, it's like, what would you find is more useful if you're out and about? It's like there's hardly enough light down there to be able to work out that's a gate. I need to sort of scan back and forth, whereas the Olight, boom, you can sort of see what's going on, and that's really the difference that I find with the different types of beam. But it kind of depends what you want, what you're going to use the torches for. Yeah, I think it's quite clear. You can see there's a lot more light coming out of the aspheric lens in terms of concentration of light on the target, but it's just that beam's not so good. You know, we can compare it to the little KR1 as well, and again, you know, that KR1 It's got quite a nice big beam to it. You know, again, clearly you can see the intensities there with the aspheric lens, because we can even see it when we put the two beams together. But in terms of usability, I think the aspheric lens just really loses out. It's a novelty, it's just not very practical. I would never take this as my only torch to go out walking. I would certainly want something that lights up a much bigger area. So just to finish off and try and, you know, show a little bit about how throw is different in different lights. I've got one light here which is not a thrower. This is a Zebralight SC600. So we've got an XHP 50.2 in it. You know, it's 2000 plus lumens on high mode, and a, you know, above average reflector size for sort of a tube style light. So it's a really good little EDC light. But let's crank that up. So that's full power with this thing. As you can see, we're lighting up the foreground brilliantly. Now with the naked eye I can just see the pole and the electricity box down there, but I don't know if it's showing up on camera particularly. And that's really the difference between a floodder and a thrower, is there's very, very few throwy lights that you can sort of fit in your pocket in EDC. That KR1 is probably one of the few, and that's really the big difference. And I just wanted to come out here and sort of demonstrate what the different beam profiles are like, you know, and where you might want to spend your money. You know, these mag lights, if you're in the USA, they're pretty good actually for what they are. I can certainly light stuff up down range with it, and it lights stuff up better than the Zebralight does at distance, quite noticeably. But it's not a high-powered flashlight, this one. No, or would something like an FT03 better suit your purposes? There are lights like the FT03 that come with those Osram LEDs. I've actually got a Convoy L21A on order at the moment, so we'll review that when it comes. But there are quite a few. The Nocticon K1 can be spec'd with that emitter, and it's about the same size as the FT03. So there's quite a lot of choice out there these days if you do want a throwy light, and you can get stuff for anywhere from sort of, you know, $20 to $100, no problem. You know, and that's going to be sort of sterling wise. Well, you won't get the Maglite quite so cheap in the UK, but you know, 35 quid up to about 80 quid, and you can get something, you know, that's really, really quite good. If you do need extreme throw, you know, you're going to be paying 150, 250, 350 pounds. The latest craze is the known as the LEP or LEP, laser excited phosphor lights. So they tend to use an aspheric lens as well, very much like the Unique Fire I've got here tonight, but quite different in terms of beam. You know, they can have 800,000, 1 million CD or even above, but you're going to be paying triple figures to get one of those at the moment. For me though, it's just a pocket carry light. The winner is the EA01, I think. The fact that up close it offers enough flood to walk about with. It's very, very compact, not quite EDC compact, but it will certainly fit in a coat pocket, no trouble. But we can get out to well over 100 yards with it, absolutely no trouble, which makes it an impressive compact package. Cheers.